Imagine serving your country for 21 years and at the tail end of a distinguished career, deploying as a medic within Marine Infantry and Special Operations, you suddenly find yourself in a legal battle where the system that you have so honorably served turns on you, and now you have to navigate a new challenge after all this time. Well, that is what we're going to talk about today, but we're not going to just talk about that. We're also going to talk about his distinguished career. Eric Gilmet, how are you doing today?
Good. How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you so much for being on the Stories of Service podcast. This is Stories of Service, ordinary people who do extraordinary work. And I am the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And as we always do to get this show started, I'm going to play an intro from my father, Charlie Pickard.
From the moment we're born and lock eyes with our parents, we are inspiring others. By showing up as a vessel of service, we not only help others, we help ourselves. Welcome to S.O.S, Stories of Service, hosted by Teresa Carpenter, here from ordinary people from all walks of life who have transformed their communities by performing extraordinary work.
And Eric is a retired Navy Chief Hospital Corpsman whose story is of service, sacrifice, and resilience. And we actually met because we're classmates at the University of San Francisco getting our master's in public leadership. He grew up in a small town in mid-Michigan, and at just 18 years old, he committed his life to serving his country. And for 21 years, he wore the uniform with honor, deploying as a medic with both Marine Infantry and Special Operations Forces. His career brought him into some of the most challenging environments where he provided life-saving care to Marines on the battlefield. But his legacy is not about also the years of service. It's also about his role in the saga of what was known in the media as the MARSOC 3. Alongside two Marine raiders, he faced several years of legal battles after being accused in connection with the death of a civilian contractor while stationed in Iraq. And what followed was a grueling fight for justice that drew national attention, highlighting issues of accountability, military justice reform, and the heavy toll such cases take on service members and their families. But during that weight of the ordeal, he's emerged with dignity and strength, and now retired since 2023, he finds his peace in Michigan with family, working on projects at the lake house, golfing, bird watching, going to school, and he continues to live with the quiet resilience that carried him through this storm. And today we're going to talk about his small town beginnings to the height of special operations. We'll go into the trials of the MARSOC 3 case and the lessons that he's carried forward from that into civilian life. So welcome again, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So first off, I always ask people, I know you're from Michigan, but where I know you're where in Michigan were you from, and what inspired you to initially join the Navy?
So I grew up just east of Lansing, just a small town called Williamston, and I originally had joined because I wanted to be a doctor, and I had enrolled in college and got accepted to Western Michigan University, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't think I'm gonna do well in college. It just didn't feel right. So I ended up joining the Navy to be a corpsman, and I ultimately was gonna do. I think I had like a 5-year contract when I signed up. I was gonna do that, use my Montgomery GI Bill, maybe become a doctor someday, and then. Shortly after joining, I changed my mind from being a doctor and decided to, go work with Marines. And I basically spent my entire career working in Marine units.
What drew you to do that? Like go from being a corpsman stationed at the hospitals, doing standard corpsman jobs. And for those of you who are not in the Navy, a medical corpsman is a medical personnel in the United States Navy. But what drew you to go that route in the corpsman field?
It's funny because I don't have like some elaborate story of like what drew me in. People are like, oh, I watched the towers fall or any of that stuff. It was literally just I didn't think I could make it in college, right? But I didn't know anything about the military when I joined, and what drew me to work with Marines was when I was going through basic training. They were called division commanders. So my recruit division commander had everybody, all the recruits, when he was talking to us, and he asked who's going to be a corpsman, and a bunch of us raised our hands, and then he said, which one of you is going to go work with the Marines? And I asked him a question. I said, what's that like? And he said, it's a living hell. And I thought that sounds kind of fun. So I decided to do that. So after I finished Corpsman A school, I you can do your ask for like the 3 duty stations you want. The first one I picked was Second Marine Division, and I'm sure they were probably like, "What the hell's wrong with this idiot? Like, why is he picking this first his first pick?" And they didn't deny me it. So I went to Field Medical Service School and became a field corpsman, and went to an infantry unit, and then from there I like I said, I worked alongside Marines the rest of my career.
Love it, love it. Now I have a quick question for you to go to the technical side. I'm going to just do a left turn here. Is there a way that you're able? Are you on Wi-Fi or are you on data?
Yeah, I should be on Wi-Fi.
Okay, you're coming in
Oh,
blurry.
wait, maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Is
Let me see.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to put
See
myself
if
on
that's
full
better.
screen while you do this. If you're able to switch over to whatever you're not on. So a lot of times when people do the live shows, because you were coming in real clear before the show, but what happened is you went from coming in uh, clear to coming in blurry. And there's another way you can do this. You just log off and then come right back on under the other Wi-Fi, either under Wi-Fi or under data, whichever one you were not on.
Yeah, it shouldn't have been. Let me see if this is better.
Okay. And I do apologize. Live shows. These are some of the technical details that we work out on the fly with you guys watching. And I think it's important that you guys see the show as clearly as possible. And that's another way to do that. But it's also a good time. He's coming off the show and coming back on for me to give you some announcements about some of the upcoming shows I have planned. Well, here he is back in.
Better.
Let's see.
Better.
Oh, yeah. That's
Okay.
100%. Sweet.
Okay. Perfect.
So tell me a little bit about what some of the experiences that you had with Second Marine Division in the infantry, because that's kind of the ground zero of what Marines do. So tell me a little bit about some of those about where you were stationed and what you did.
Yeah, I was with Second Battalion, 6th Marines at Camp Lejeune in Golf Company, 1st Platoon. So I was in a line company, and it was an interesting experience, that's for sure. Being like you said, infantry is that's the I guess you would say the focus of everybody in the military is to support the infantry,
Yes,
right? So
absolutely.
um it was an eye-opening experience. Growing up in a unbelievably small town in the middle of Michigan, to being surrounded by people who were from different walks, all walks of life, right? It was interesting, but I really really enjoyed my time there. Taught me a lot, and got to do some deployments. I would probably say I was busier in the infantry than I was when I was in special forces. Uh, did a UDP to Japan, to Okinawa, and then we had embassy duty in Baghdad for deployment, and then my last deployment with them was to uh, a, a small town just north of Fallujah called Saklawea. And then that basically finished out my 3 years with them.
Were you ever in places where you thought that you might lose your life, or you thought that there might be some harm to either you or your shipmates or your Marines?
Yeah, definitely. Baghdad wasn't too bad. That one was a pretty easy deployment. We got a lot of IDF at the embassy, but other than that, not really. But that third deployment to Sacagawea was our heaviest combat than we had seen. A lot of IEDs, a lot of IDF. It was, and that's a couple guys from my platoon got killed on that deployment. They were hit by a mortar round outside. So,
what's your opinion about combat medical care? Do you feel like it's uh, where it should be, or do you feel like, because they always say that that's like military doesn't always do medical well, but we do combat medical well, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I would say, yeah, we absolutely do combat medicine probably the best. my skills going into the infantry were, you don't know what you don't know, right? So go
Sure.
in, I'm like, oh, this is great. I felt like I knew a lot. And then, when I went through my training pipeline to become Special Operations Independent Duty Corpsman, and I went through the Joint Special Operations Medical Training Center in Fort Bragg, uh, that was extremely eye opening. And I remember going into that. Uh, as a, what did I say? I said, I thought I knew medicine, but I had no idea, you know, what you can learn and what you can actually do. But yeah, we definitely do it well. I mean, the amount of training that I went through, just the rigorous over and over going through the motions constantly. There's definitely things from that I'll never forget because I trained to it so
Mhm.
much. Yeah.
What was maybe one of your favorite experiences that you had while you were serving in infantry?
Uh, Man, you're making me think back to a long time ago. That was, 20 years ago. I don't know. I mean, I just, I really enjoyed being in the field. Uh, with my brothers, and just all the training and the deploying. I mean, the things that you remember looking back are all the miserable times, right? But it was in the shitty times that you probably had the most fun. And so it was just being in that environment with those guys. Like we all loved what we did, and yeah, it was
Yeah.
just, yeah, that was probably my favorite thing.
What just inspired you to go from serving in the infantry to then cross over into special forces, and how did that come about?
So at the end of my time in the infantry, I went and worked at a clinic on Camp Lejeune that supported the Combat Engineer School there, and I think I had been there for about a year and some change, and I was like, you know what, I want to get out. I don't like what I'm doing anymore. Um, had gone through all the process to end my contract, and remember talking to my wife. I think we lived in Sneed's Ferry at the time. We had just moved there, and there was one of my neighbors. He lived like kind of kitty corner to me. Uh, he was a recon marine. I remember I'd be, at home up in our bonus room above the garage watching TV, and I'd see all his buddies, uh, other recon marines, drive up with their families, and they'd be hanging out and stuff, and just the brotherhood over there. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I want to do something like that. So I, and as a young corpsman, we all knew what a recon corpsman was, right? So I remember talking to my wife, and I said, I don't want to get out. I want to do this. Can I do this? And she said,
Mhm.
yeah, go ahead. Um, so I, took the physical screening to go. I actually failed it the first time, and then I had to do it a few months later. And then that one I definitely passed, and then I was able to start the pipeline. So that's what drew me. That's what drew me to it.
Wow, that's awesome. And I think that what you're saying really resonates with a lot of people, because the biggest memory that most people have when serving is the camaraderie and the brotherhood, or in my case, the brother and the sisterhood. It's
Yeah,
just being able to be with people, even in the worst of times,
uh-huh.
sometimes brings out the best of people and the biggest parts of our humanity. And you
Yeah,
won't see that unless people are stressed and
yeah,
they're under fire. So I think that there's something to be said for that. That a lot of times, especially as we retire and we get out, it's like we're still sort of chasing that community that we had, because there's just nothing that really matches that level of friendship.
yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So you go from the infantry to the special forces. Take me back. We're going to start talking a little bit about your case and where you were. I want to kind of understand where you were at your career when this thing happened in Iraq. Were you thinking this was going to be my last deployment and then I'm going to retire? Or were you thinking to yourself, this is just another deployment and I'm going to keep on going?
Yeah, at some point before that deployment, I don't know when it was. I had, I was obviously so far along that I might as well do the 20 years, but I had made it up in my mind that I wanted to do 30 years. I wanted to become the command master chief of MARSOC, so I had, I'd even thought about, at some point maybe, diverting my career and becoming an actual CMC, right? And then, as you know, you can go anywhere. So,
Mhm.
I thought it might be cool to, take my experiences that I learned there and maybe apply them somewhere else in big Navy, right? Which I think more leaders should do, right? And I know that the Navy tries to do that, as you know the deal. Like you could have a CMC who's a corpsman that could be,
Sure.
a CMC of a ship, right?
Right.
So that was my grand plan. But obviously, with what happened in 2019, it changed that.
Yep. So we're going to get into it. That's why we're doing the call. Not the only reason why. I always love just hearing people's stories, but this was one that really stuck out to me because it wasn't the typical military justice gone wrong. They fired me and now I'm upset, or an assault happened. Well, an assault did happen, but it's not a sexual assault. And a lot of times the cases that I cover are of a sexual nature. So this case is a lot different in what happened. So I know you've talked about this before, and share just what you're comfortable sharing. Tell me a little bit about where you were stationed in Iraq and what happened on that night in question.
Yeah, so I'll provide some good context here too, because I'm sure that some people in your audience are either active duty or were in the military. You got to definitely understand the where we were at, right? So you'll hear people say Iraq, northern Iraq. Well, we were in Kurdistan, right, which is northern Iraq, and we were in Erbil, very permissive environment to where we were allowed to go out in town. We would go out in town, go to restaurants, have a drink. You could go to the mall, sightseeing, whatever. It was, Erbil is a very, well, when I was there, I'm sure it's the same now, a very safe city. Um, we were at the, I think it was called the Erbil Air Base. And on the base, there were, different countries there. They had their own little camps, and so we had our camp as well, which was Camp 762. And on the camp, you had the Marines from the unit there that I was in, and then we had contractors there. Well, the contractors lived on the north end of the camp, and my job didn't require me to interact with them that much. So I knew a couple of the guys over there, but not all of them. So I think it's, yeah, like I said, I think it's important to provide context to the people listening to understand like the environment and where we were at.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you know a lot? You didn't really work side by side with the contractors or even the contractor in question, correct?
No, before that, before the incident on January 1st, 2019, I didn't even know the guy's name. I had gone back. I'd gone to where the contractors work. I was looking for a guy named Tyler, uh, and Rick was back there again. Like I said, I didn't even know his name at the time. And walk up, I said, "Hey, is Tyler around?" He said, "No, he went to breakfast. So I'll be back in about an hour." I said, "Cool," and I left. Um, Other than that, the only time I would see Rick was in the gym because we worked out uh, at the same time, like at about 4 o'clock every day. But I never interacted with him in the gym. I would go in there and do my workout and leave.
Hmm. So take me back to the night of January 1st. It's New Year's Day or New Year's Eve?
Yeah, it was New Year's Eve. So me, Danny, and Josh, we signed out, said we were going, got our vehicle, and took off, and we went to a place called the Grill, a pretty nice restaurant over there actually, and we hung out, welcomed in the new year, and then at about 2, 3 in the morning, we went to a place called the T Bar, and that's where a lot of I guess you would say Westerners hung out. When they would leave the base, they would go to the T Bar, to include a lot of the Marines and contractors from our camp. So the three of us walk in there. It's a bar, so people are drinking, people are dancing,
Sure.
and I'm walking, making my way through the crowd. I see Rick. Again, didn't know his name, but we knew who we were, right? We both knew we lived at the camp. So I went up and said hi, Happy New Year. We shook hands, did the whole bro hug thing. Talked for a little bit, and then I, wandered off and did something else. So that was, probably the longest my longest interaction I've had with him to that up until that time, right? And then when we were getting ready to leave, or close to the time to leave, me, Danny, and Josh were at the bar talking to the owner of the place.
Mhm.
And then Rick, got my attention. I moved away from the group to hear what he had to say, and the conversation definitely caught me off guard. I don't remember everything that was said, but I remember some things. And the part of the conversation that sticks out to me the most was he said, "Hey, I'm a former Green Beret. I got 5 Bronze Stars, and why don't you show me any respect?" And I remember when he had said that, I thought to myself, like, okay, dude, I don't give a fuck, but whatever. But I could tell the dude was, I don't know if he was, I could tell he was drunk. I
Mhm.
didn't want it to get dumb, so I just said, "Hey, man, sorry you feel that way," um, and that was it. And then I went back to my conversation with Danny and Josh.
It's just so odd that he would just go up to you and he was just feeling combative, it sounds like, at the moment for whatever
Oh yeah.
reason.
Out of all the things that unfolded from like that moment up until I got out, that's probably the one thing that I think back and I'm still confused about, like, why, dude? Like, why that moment that night? Why come talk to me about that?
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So he says what he says, you say what you say, and you guys go your separate ways at that point?
Yep, we go our separate ways,
Okay.
and then they turn the lights on. Everybody can tell it's time to go. I got my jacket on, and Rick is right next to me, and I give him a pat in the back. I just said, "Hey, man, just want to make sure everything's good." Um, and he started talking about it again, and he was a little more agitated this time, and finally, he's getting in my face, swearing at me, and finally at this point, I'm like, "You know what, dude, go fuck yourself," right? And the bouncers see what's happening. They separate us, and they kicked him out. And I think it's important to note that they kicked him out because earlier that night, before we'd even gotten there, he had gotten into an verbal altercation with another
Hmm.
person that was there. So I think they probably had their eye on him, right?
Sure.
So they tell him to go. They ask us to wait for about 5 minutes. We were like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Uh, and then we leave. And as we're walking out, we exit the place. We turn left to head down to our vehicle, and Rick is waiting there with some of the other Marines that from the camp, and a couple of his buddies who were other contractors. And before we had left, I told Danny what was going on. He's like, "Okay." Um, that was, but we weren't in there like planning anything. He just said, "I'll handle it. I'll take care of this. I'll get him to calm down." Um, so we walk out there, and Danny approached him and tried to get Rick to calm down, and Rick wasn't having any of it, and he attacked Danny, and Josh came in, and I think before Rick could hit him a third time, Josh knocked him out.
Right.
Yeah,
And it sounds to me like at that point it's just a self-defense move because he's already been hit twice, like you
yeah,
said.
yeah.
So at this point, you just want to defuse the situation and fight back,
Exactly. Yeah. So Josh had a right to come in and
defend
Danny.
his
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So he falls to the ground, and
He
what
falls
happens
to
then?
he falls to the ground, and there's a crowd around him. So I go up, and I see Rick on the ground, and I can tell he's unconscious. And I tell everybody, "Hey, everybody, back up. Let's give him some room." And I check him out. He's still breathing fine. There's no obvious injuries that I can tell. And I put him on his side to put him in the recovery position. That's a way to keep somebody's airway open, because when he was on the ground, he was starting to snore, right? So I could tell, okay, maybe his tongue is starting to block his airway, right? So that's why I put him on his side. And when I put him on his side, I could take a look at his backside, and he had a small laceration on the back of his head, probably about an inch. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe it hit his head. Uh, but then other than that, there were no issues. I looked at all the Marines and that were there with him, and I said, "Hey, you guys gonna get him off the street?" And they all looked at me like I was an idiot. So I said, "Okay, fine, we'll take him. Right? Let's get the
Wow.
fuck out of here. Right? Like we're in the middle of
Right.
Erbil, right?" So we put him in the back of our truck, and by in the back of the truck, I mean the back seat, right? We had that quad cab F-150, so there's a lot of room in the back when you put up the seats.
Mhm. So the same
Um,
person that just picked a fight with you guys, you're like, okay, now it's on us to take care of him. What a
yeah,
turn.
yeah, well, yeah, because none of his buddies or at least people that knew him, right, were gonna do
Right.
anything. So like, well, we
Wow.
gotta go. So
Yep.
um took him back. Uh Danny was asking, "Hey Eric, what do you want to do?" I said, let's just head back to camp and get him in his room, and I can evaluate him there. So um and just so people in your audience understand this, I was a provider, right? So I had this being able to check him out and make sure he's okay is was within my purview as an independent duty corpsman. Like I'm authorized to do that. So it wasn't like I didn't know what I was doing or know what I was looking for, right? So we take him back to camp. I go to Tyler's room with that contractor that I said I knew, and I said, "Hey, there was a fight, and Rick got knocked out. He's unconscious. We got to get him in his room." He's like, "Okay." So he gets us into Rick's room. We take him in there, put him on his bed, and I proceed to spend the rest of the night. I think it was probably around 4 or 5 in the morning, maybe. The rest of so yeah, not the rest of the night, but the rest of the morning, keeping an eye on Rick. I did some checks to make sure there's nothing wrong with him neurologically, because at this point that's my biggest concern. There were multiple things that I checked for, and nothing had indicated that he needed a higher level of care. So at about 9 o'clock, and at maybe 8:39, I went and got some breakfast. I had Tyler keep an eye on him. Come back from breakfast. It wasn't that long, maybe 10 minutes, and he had rolled out of bed, Rick, and he was on the floor. So I'm like, okay, I'm like Jesus, and so I put him back on his side, um, covered him up, put a pillow on his under his head, and hung out for a little bit longer. And then finally, I asked Tyler. I said, "Hey, can you keep an eye on him? I got to go get some sleep. I had a brief in like a couple hours, so I was exhausted." So he's like, "Yeah, no problem." Tyler knew where my room was at. I said, "Hey, come get me if there's any problems." And around 10 o'clock that morning, Tyler comes into my room and wakes me up, and he says, "Hey, Rick's not breathing. You got to come right now." So I threw my shoes on and ran over to where Rick was at, and yeah, I could tell he wasn't breathing. He was, his face was blue. He had to look like some vomit around his mouth, and I go up, I check his pulse. He had a really weak pulse, and he wasn't breathing. And I look at Tyler and I said, "Hey, go get help and get a vehicle right now." And not a lot of time passed. A vehicle shows up with some Marines, and including the doctor. We had a doctor on the camp. Ashley Fang was her name. Uh, and I said, "We got to get him in the truck and get him to the Roll 2 hospital right now." So we threw him in the truck and drove over there. And I was in the bed of the truck with him. At some point on the drive, I lost a pulse, so I started doing CPR in the back of the truck, and then we rolled up to the hospital, and uh, they came out with a gurney, and uh, they took him inside, and that was that was the end of my treatment for with Rick.
Right. And then how much longer after that were you told that he ended up passing away?
I don't think. I think it was 4 days later, but I think that what it was he was on life support, um, because he had gone. What was it? I think he was in cardiac arrest for probably 6 minutes,
Oh,
right? Yeah, so nobody's coming back from that. So I think it was about 4 days later they flew his family out to Germany, and they took him off life support.
So this very tragic thing happens. You don't know what is happening those first few days, other than the fact that he's in the hospital in critical care. When did this, at this point, you're just getting questioned about it from an investigative standpoint or just a incident report? Let's, like, you go and you hurt yourself at work in the military and you have to do a report. So where were they at in terms of the authorities with how they were handling what happened?
So it wasn't until um, that evening, Josh had gone on a quick like convoy that day, and he came back, and the three of us went and found our first sergeant and said, "Hey, this is what happened last night," and he said, "Okay," and we went back to our rooms, and shortly after that, they told us, "Hey, you guys are." They took away our weapons, they took away our phones, our computers, and said, "Hey, you guys are confined to your rooms, uh, and you guys, can go eat, you know, eat eat food and go to the gym. Essentially, that's all you can do." Um, so immediately, within a few hours of everything, kind of, I guess you could say, settling down right around camp, they had pegged us as the suspects in this case. So
I'm It's just crazy to me because this everything you're telling me just says that this was a tragic accident that happened because somebody was in a position where they took a blow, and during that blow they just expired. I mean, that can happen. And
yeah,
one of the questions Mandy Fight has, and I think I can answer it, but she just says, from 4 to 9 a.m., did he ever gain consciousness? I believe the answer to that is no.
no,
And did he ever speak to your friend during that time? No. And was he bleeding from the laceration on the back of his head?
no.
Okay. So you're now getting this feeling that this is not going to be just you say what happens and they take your statement and
Well, we
then
didn't not even taking a statement. I mean, we just had said that, hey, this is what happened. We were out that night, and there was a fight. Rick got knocked out, and just
right.
um, and that was it. But I think by the next day, uh, a agent from NCIS was there,
Mm-hmm.
and Danny's wife Destiny had reached out to him and said, uh, "Hey, here's the names of some lawyers for you guys to call." And I called Colby Vokey, who ended up, being my civilian lawyer through the whole process, and he said, "Yeah, I'll take your case." He said, "Do not make a statement to anybody." I said, "Okay." So, I think it was probably a couple days after the incident that they flew the three of us uh, to Bahrain, where the NCIS headquarters is in the Middle East. Um, and we stayed in a hotel there for a couple days. But when we went in, they did the whole rigmarole, right, of took our pictures and our DNA and took our fingerprints, and they gave us this sheet.
Oh, I think we lost you. We lost him. Let's see if I can get him back. I'm going to go full screen just for a second. But thank you guys for your patience and sticking around with us for a minute. So I don't know if it might be because we changed over the connections. But let me see if I can get you back on. Give me just 1 second. Nope, not yet. Well, I'm going to use this time. a break in the show to talk a little bit about what I've got lined up for the next couple weeks on the Stories of Service podcast. There's a lot of people who always ask me, hey, can you put out a schedule? And I am hesitant to do that because a lot of times I make changes to the schedule or somebody cancels and then they have to reschedule and come back on. So I'm not able to always do that. But I will let you know some of the shows that I do have on the agenda. And I will not have to do that because I got Eric back.
Yeah,
You
yeah. My sister was FaceTiming me. I like ignored it, and then it just lost everything. So
hey, no worries. Let me take the other one, kick this from studio, and then now we are back. So to catch this back, you call Colby. He tells you not to make any statements. That's where we are.
Okay, and then about a couple days after the incident, they ended up taking Danny, Josh, and I to Bahrain, where NCIS headquarters is in the Middle East, and they brought us in one at a time, and did the whole take our pictures and took our fingerprints and DNA, and they gave us the sheet of what we were accused of. It was like negligent homicide, involuntary manslaughter, and maybe a couple other things, and so you're kind of reading through the list, and then at the end, at the bottom, it says, sign here or mark here if you want a lawyer. So I did that, and I said, "Yep, I want my lawyer present if you guys are going to ask me questions," and that ended it. So they, I never ended up giving a statement to anybody. So, which is actually, if anybody's listening and you are ever for any reason brought in, don't say anything to anybody. Trust me.
Yeah, even if you're innocent, I agree. Yeah. Don't say anything because it can be used against you or twisted.
Yep.
So, how did you feel when this happened? Were you surprised that they were coming after you guys?
No, I wasn't. Because at this time, you had the Eddie Gallagher case was heating up. You had the issue with the Navy SEALs and the Raiders, and the Mali case. I think there was like a congressional. I think that at the beginning of that month there was a congressional review or inquiry. I can't say that word.
Congressional inquiry.
Yeah, about discipline issues within SOCOM, right? So when all this started going on, I was like, I had a feeling, I'm like, this is going to get really shitty really fast because all that stuff was going on, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
And they also need something to explain to the family as to what happened. And so there's always logical to say, okay, the person that knocked him out must have knocked him out in a way that could be construed as murder.
Yeah.
So I could understand why they investigated it 100%.
Yeah.
In their shoes, I would have done the same thing. It's what you have to do. So you lawyer up in Bahrain. You're in Bahrain. What happens next?
We're only there for probably 2-3 days, and then they sent us to Kuwait. I can't remember the name of the camp, but we were there for a couple of weeks, and basically it was on us to figure out how to get home. And we ended up jumping on a commercial flight that had a bunch of other a bunch of soldiers, and it was flying into I think Dulles is where it flew into, and we got off the plane there, and there was a van from the unit that came and got us and took us back, and we ended up, I think I got back home on the January 17th or the 21st, something like that, I think.
Okay, so not too long after the incident happened, you're back at MARSOC at your home base. And what is life like now? Now it's like full on, most just fighting the legal case.
No, we didn't get officially charged until December of 2019. But I was, they took away my ability to see patients. I wasn't in a team, so I basically I sat in the aid station. Working on college. I was in my bachelor's program, and I I did that, and I finished that summer. I finished my bachelor's program, and I finished or my bachelor's degree, and then I got an associate's degree as well that summer. So 'cause I was just on a computer, so I'd spend my days finding an excuse to not have to go into work or be doing schoolwork. That's how I
Yeah,
spent my
because they took
summer.
away your ability to do your job. And you were
Exactly.
just in a holding pattern while they did the investigation. That's what it sounds like to me.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Okay. So they do an investigation that takes from January to December. So it takes a year to do.
About, yeah.
Wow. Okay. And during this time, your colleagues are in the same position you are. They are on hold. They can't go anywhere. They can't do anything for a full year. They're
hmm
just under investigation and their lives are on hold and they don't know what's going to happen next. Correct?
Yeah.
And during this time, was your lawyer, your civilian lawyer, or your military lawyer, were they working with the command to try to negotiate some kind of a deal or try to get more information or try to get information that NCIS was collecting, or how did that work during that year?
No, they I mean, so I mean, I know you know this, but I know you're asking me this for your listeners. So, the only ones that the only entity. So if the prosecution's the only one that talks to the command. They work hand in hand with them. It's like saying, here's what's going on. Here's updates, stuff like that. The defense has nothing to do with that. So they didn't try to, you know, contact them. Maybe because they knew that none of them were going to listen. I think it was probably a couple years after it had happened, our defense lawyers did reach out to the command and asked, "Hey, can we come talk to you guys? You've only gotten, basically it's like you've only gotten one side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Can you sit down with us and hear this side of it?" And they didn't want to hear it from them. So
Wow. And and to keep you on hold for that long over something that took place over the period of, gosh, a few hours. That just amazes me that it took a whole year to investigate this
yeah,
issue. During that year, was this already in the media and getting highly publicized?
well, it was, but like it actually never got that much. It never made it to mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
I think the highlight, it made it into, I think, the Marine Corps Times. It made it onto
Task and purpose.
Task and Purpose, a couple other things, but it never got the publicity that, an Eddie Gallagher got, right?
Sure.
So,
Okay. So then I guess we'll go right into December. So December, you get charged and your colleagues get charged, and that's when that's when everything starts for you. What happens after that?
it was called an Article 15 hearing, which is basically a grand jury, right? So they came in, we went in, and all three of us, and they brought in some witnesses. Lawyers got to ask questions, but after that was done, the command split up Danny, Josh, and I to where they had a combined trial or a joint trial scheduled for Danny and Josh, and then I was on my own. Um, so I actually they had brought in for my judge a naval commander who was out of Norfolk at the time. His name was Commander Larson. Um, I think it was maybe about a month or so after the Article 15 hearing that my trial was set for May of
Okay.
2020. And then so we were basically starting to get ready for that, and then here comes March 2020, and we all know what happened then, right? The fancy flu struck, and we everything got shut down. So uh, COVID ended up delaying my trial, or I guess you wouldn't even say my trial. I guess you would call it my court proceedings. It delayed it by 2 years, 3 years.
Your court martial was
Yeah.
delayed
So
2 or 3 years because of COVID.
yeah. So what had happened was, it was so like everything the can just kept getting kicked down the road, right? Because people couldn't travel because of COVID. Well, hell, one of the biggest issues was, so that hospital that we took, they're called a roll two. Uh, it's the Canadians were in charge of it. So
Mhm.
on my handoff, it was to a Canadian doctor. I think his last name was Wistra, and the Canadians were really stringent on their civilians with COVID, especially their doctors. Well, Dr. Wistra was an ICU physician, so he was needed in Canada. So, and the prosecution really wanted him as a witness. And Canada's like, no, he cannot come together for trial, because he would have to do not only like the 2 weeks of my trial, but then Danny and Josh's trial would be 2 weeks as well. So we're talking about a month
Wow.
not at home working. So Canada was not cooperating with the government in terms of him coming here to trial. So finally, they had the judge were like, okay, we'll authorize a deposition, right? And Canada said, sure, but you guys have to come to Canada for this deposition. So by the time it got all figured out on schedules and stuff like that, it wasn't until the beginning of November of 2021 that we went to Canada for the deposition.
That's crazy. That is absolute. I did not understand, Eric, when we talked about this case before, that these were delays that were worked into the system because of COVID, and how, I mean, because during this time, all three of you are just in limbo. I mean, yeah, that's what Mandy fight. She's just like, holy shit. And I'm kind of like that too right now, because your whole family is, you can't move on. Your career is in the balance of all this, and you're just waiting, and there's nothing. I mean, I'm not blaming the military either at this. I mean, this is just, I don't think people understand. Like, I'm sure there were other court martials that were impacted this same way, where certain witnesses
Yeah.
were not available, and so because they were not available, these cases just lingered on.
Yeah, exactly.
So she said, please tell me you got a master's degree during that time period. Not funny, but tears is ridiculous. Well, no, he didn't get a master's degree. He's getting one now with me.
No, trying to now. Yeah. Yeah. I had actually, side note, I had actually started applying for, I wanted to, I started thinking, okay, eventually my career is going to end, right? It's either
Right.
going to end with me retiring, or something with this court martial.
Yeah, what were you facing, Eric? Like, what were they telling you when you got charged that was going to be the punishment for this if you were found guilty?
Oh, it's like 10, 20 years in prison, something like that.
My God, how did you handle the stress?
Well, I really enjoy cocktails, so
And you
so
have a family and a family.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. It was just, I'll just say this: it was stressful, right? No, I had actually I decided, okay, well, if I get out, I thought about wanting to be a what the hell's it called? Like, like the chief operations officer, like a COO of like a hospital or something, right?
Okay.
So there were two schools that I looked up. I did a lot of research on this, and one was UNC Chapel Hill. They got a really good, I think it's called Masters in Health Administration, I think is what it's called. They had a really good program, and it was kind of like what we're doing for San Francisco. It was hybrid, right? So it was basically all online. I think every semester you go to Chapel Hill, which is where I lived at. It was like a 2-hour drive, right? It was nothing. You go there like twice, 2 days every semester. And then I applied to that one. I obviously disclosed what I was going through, because they had asked these questions, and they didn't accept my application because they thought I would be a threat to the students on campus.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then I applied to another program, University of Central Florida, which has a really good MHA program as well, which is all online, and they would not accept me because of what I was going through.
Eric, people are just absolutely flabbergasted about this. This was absolutely amazing that this was allowed to be this delayed. I am shocked too.
Before everybody starts thinking like, oh shit, like this took way too long. Like, we all need to, everybody pump the brakes for a second, right? Because I know we're getting to this part of the story, but without these delays, my trial would never have been, or my charges never would have been dismissed. So it ended up being a good thing.
A
And
blessing in
the other
disguise.
thing too is like once COVID happened, right? You know, and Teresa, like, it was essential personnel only coming into work, right?
Yep.
Well, on the list of essential personnel at my unit, Eric was at the bottom, right? So, I didn't come in for a while, and then finally, once people started trickling back into work, I went to my senior chief and I said, "Hey, Sean, I'm not fucking coming into work anymore." I said, "I don't." I told him, I'm like, "I'm not fucking coming in." I said, I don't do anything." I said,
Right.
"Fucking pointless." I said, "I'll be at home. Call me if you need me." He was like, "Okay, dude." So for the next from the time COVID happened until I retired, I went into work, I don't know, 5 times.
And how many years was that? That was like a 3-year period, right?
Well,
3 years,
yeah,
actually?
it was a three. Yeah, I guess you could see. Yeah, it's a 4-year period. All 2020, 21, 22, and most of 23. Yeah. So I
Wow.
stayed home. And I took up woodworking, and I I learned. You're a master grocery shopper when you know where every single thing is in the grocery store, right? So, I became Mr. Mom, right? Like I was,
Right.
I remember going into food line to get groceries and like learning all the aisles. And then at some point I was able to just like, oh, where's the chopped almonds at? Oh yeah, that's in the baking section, right? Like I became that guy, right?
Right.
So, um, but it was a blessing in disguise because I was able to, still get paid and but be at home and do what I wanted to do. So
Yep. You can educate yourself and work on and help your lawyers prepare for your case.
exactly,
I mean,
exactly. I spent a lot of
that's
time doing that. Yeah,
and that sometimes is just the best you can take away from an obvious less than ideal situation. So let's go back to when this finally comes around, when the court martial comes around. My understanding is yours was separate. Danny and Josh, they were tried together in the same court martial, and then yours came later, or yours came before.
my trial.
Yes,
Well, see, I never went to trial. That was the
right.
thing.
But I'm saying, well, when this got adjudicated, when this got dropped.
Oh,
That's what I really meant.
I think my trial. So after that deposition of
In Canada.
Wisha in Canada, that basically was like, okay, that was the final thing that was needed, and they had set our trial date. So mine was set for uh January, and I think it was like January 21st, and I think Danny and Josh's was at some point after that. I can't remember. Um,
What year? January 21st,
that was
20.
January 21st, 2021.
Got it.
Excuse
Okay.
me, 2020. Was it 2021? No, sorry, 2022. It was
22. Okay.
January 1st, 21st, 2022. But yeah, we never even made it to trial because, shortly after that deposition, that's when Colonel Shaw, made those comments to my military lawyer, and that got the ball rolling for the trial to get, or the charges to get dismissed.
And that is another part of this story that
Yeah.
we're going to now pivot to, because as you three were waiting for your day in court, or your day to clear your names and to actually talk about what happened and to look at the evidence, something happened within the JAG community that should have never happened. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was right before the Thanksgiving holiday. Um, I my so I had two military lawyers. Right? I had three total. I had Colby, my civilian lawyer, and then I Matt Thomas and Keegan Riley. They were both captains in the Marine Corps. Um, Matt was told he had to go to this like dog and pony show for a guy named Colonel Shaw. He's was one of the what do they call it? One of the chiefs of staff to the staff judge advocate of the Marine Corps. There's four colonels that work for that general, um, taking care of specific things within the community. Colonel Shaw was in charge of uh, billet assignment for all JAGs in the Marine Corps, and sorry, not billet assignment, their assignments.
Right. He's in charge, for people that don't know what billet assignment is, he's in charge of working with the JAGs on where they want to go next and what
Yeah.
is good for their career timeline. Like what if they need a milestone tour, if they need this or they need that, or if they're trying to retire and go on the off ramp, whatever. He's the person that they work with. So he's probably the equivalent of a detailer, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, not a detailer. I mean, they work. He works
Mhm.
with the detailer to kind of figure this out and where people are going, right? And
Gotcha.
you know the deal. They're looking years down the road, right?
Sure. Of who they're identifying
Where
talent. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, um, he's going around he's doing his East Coast trip. He stopped at Cherry Point and talked to the prosecution and the defense teams there. He was at Paris Island, and I think Lejeune was his last stop. So he's got these meeting with defense counsel, and it's funny because Matt had was telling his boss, he's like, I don't want to go, and he's like, no, you're fucking going, right? So Matt goes to this meeting, and Colonel Shaw starts talking about changes within the UCMJ, right? So I think it was around this time frame they had finalized all the stuff to where a lot of things within the UCMJ were being changed. Like for example, there was going to be no like a commander wasn't going to be a convening authority anymore on big cases, right? Like murder, rape, assault, stuff like that. They were going to put that power on a local prosecutor on the base to figure out if people are going to be charged or not, right? Taking the responsibility away from the commanders. So Colonel Shaw was talking about that, and Matt asked a question. He basically had said, "Hey, what's going to be done to protect those prosecutors?" I guess you could say basically serving as a DA, right? What's going to be done to protect them from outside influences?
Right. What's going to make sure that the prosecutors use the rule of evidence versus
Exactly.
any outside bias or undue command influence?
Exactly.
What is going to make sure that that doesn't happen?
Yeah. And Colonel Shaw looks at Matt and says, Captain Thomas, I know who you are. I know what cases you're working on, and you are not protected. And I think everybody's reaction was like, did he really just fucking say that? And then he goes on to say, like, you think you're protected, but you're not. He said your fit rep shields you, but it doesn't protect you. And he said the lawyer on the promotion board is going to know what you did. Those were his exact words. And then he starts talking about lawyers from the Haditha cases. That's the stuff in Iraq, the war crime stuff from like 2006, I think. He starts saying how those defense lawyers from the Haditha cases, they weren't promoted. Well, one thing everybody needs to understand, Colonel Shaw said that because he knew, not only did he know that Matt was my lawyer, he knew that Matt was working alongside Colby. Well, in 2006, Colby was the lead defense lawyer for the Haditha cases, and Colonel Shaw was the lead prosecutor for the Haditha cases.
So he knew intimately.
So he knew him. Yeah, he knew what he was saying, right? He was talking about Colby, and Colby didn't get promoted to colonel. He was a not a commander, a lieutenant
colonel.
He was a lieutenant colonel at the time,
Mhm.
and he didn't get selected for colonel. He ended up getting out of the Marine Corps. So, when he said that, he all the lawyers were like, holy shit, I cannot believe that guy just said that. And he had said some other things too that were pretty bad, but this is specific to my case, right? And word quickly spread what had happened. My
How many
lawyer,
JAGs were in the room? How many JAGs?
I think like 6 or 7.
Okay.
To include Matt's boss, who's a major. And they all wrote statements and provided them to my legal team, and then we filed a motion to our judge to dismiss the charges with prejudice based on UCI, and yeah,
Okay, so you do that,
we
and
do that. Yeah.
and what does the judge say?
So we had a motion to talk about this, and one thing to kind of understand before going into this is my judge was, excuse me, he was a really good judge. He was very smart, and one thing that you get, like, so you'll submit these motions, right? And it's got all this stuff written out, like our argument and all this shit. And so he would read through that stuff, right? And so we would submit that. We had submitted my sworn statement, and we had submitted Keegan and Matt's sworn statement saying how there was a conflict of interest, and they had reached out to their respective bar association, and
Wow.
their bars had said, "Hey, yep, there's a conflict here." So they knew with this conflict, like you cannot continue to represent me, right? It's very illegal to do that. So all that stuff was written out and given to the judge beforehand. So I say that because like when we get into a motion hearing, he wouldn't like ask anybody to repeat that stuff because it's a waste of time. We've already written it down. It's a sworn statement. He already knows what we said and what we're thinking. So he asked Matt and Keegan, he's like, "Hey, do you guys think there's a conflict?" They said yes. He said, "Do you guys want to be removed as his lawyers?" They said yeah. He asked me. I said, "Hey, can I talk to Colby to think about, talk it over for a little bit?" He's like, "Sure." We recessed for about 5 minutes. I came back in. I said, "Hey, I'm paraphrasing. I said, yeah, this whole thing is fucking shitty, but yeah, I don't want them as my lawyers anymore because there's a conflict." And when I said, I don't want them as my lawyers anymore, Judge Larson had this look on his face like, when I think back on it, I know what his facial expression was. His facial expression meant, "Holy fuck, I have to dismiss these charges now." Like it was just like this something came over him where he just realized.
Yeah, because if you aren't going to play, if you aren't just going to say, "Oh well, you know what? I've developed this great relationship with Keegan and Matt, and I believe they'll still do the right thing, even if Colonel Shaw is threatening them," then the judge could have said, "Oh, my hands are clean.
Exactly.
This will go away."
Exactly.
But when you stood up for yourself and said, "No, I can't have them represent me anymore because obviously their careers are on the line if I get let off or if I'm not charged or whatever." So that was his sign of, "Oh, the ball is now in my court and I've got the stink on me to deal with this."
Yeah. And I don't know, it was before and then so that was the very first thing we dealt with in that motion hearing. And then
Yep.
he had made his determination that yes, the defense has raised enough evidence to show that there's UCI, and the burden now shifts to the government to prove that there isn't, right? And they have to now prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there is no UCI that will affect the proceedings. But the truth of the matter is it's already affected it, right?
Right.
It happened 2 minutes ago.
And you had to drop your lawyers. So
when I had to drop my lawyers, that's the issue, right? And now they can't take that back now.
Yeah, they can't walk that back.
Exactly. So my Colby was like, "Hey, obviously I need some more lawyers," because he had those two that he just lost. And the judge was like, "Obviously we're going to do a continuance on this." And Colby was like, "Hey, we also can't have any Marine lawyers." So before all this stuff had happened with the motion hearing, Colby had reached out to, I can't remember her name, but she was a colonel. She was in charge of all defense lawyers in the Marine JAG Corps. And she had actually written a statement saying, "Hey, every single Marine lawyer doesn't want to represent Eric."
This just blows my mind, Eric. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just have to interrupt for a minute. Where are the people who are reprimanding Colonel Shaw for even saying this in the first place? Where are those people?
Obviously nowhere, because they all thought he didn't really do anything that bad. So,
this is ridiculous. This is why I do a show, guys, by the way. This is why we talk about hard issues on the Stories of Service podcast. This floors me that they put the burden of the responsibility on you to say, "Okay, now I got to find a new lawyer." And oh, by the way, just out of curiosity, were you given an investigator?
No, I wasn't, because they don't. Well, they do that in the Marine Corps, but they give you like a private, so we didn't use them. Yeah.
Okay.
Danny had a Navy lawyer, commander. She was Lieutenant Commander Luce at the time, and he had a private. He had like a dude who would like worked at NCIS for years and was out doing PI work now, and he was his investigator.
So Danny did get one. Danny got.
Oh yeah, a really good one.
a really
Yeah,
good free investigator, but you,
yeah,
on the other
exactly.
hand, were
Yeah,
given somebody who was inexperienced and who
yeah.
you
We
just
didn't
didn't.
even. I didn't even know until after the fact that we had one, and we didn't use them.
Yeah.
So
So somebody said, "Well played, Eric. Well played." Yeah. I mean, I got to hand it to you. That was a very courageous move to just go from 3 lawyers to one. But of course, I mean, I would have felt backed into the same corner that you did. I would have been like, well, no, obviously they know their career. How did they feel about it? Were they? I mean, because they put all this work into the case, and they probably felt like, well, this is BS. Now I'm off of a case that I feel strongly about and that I'm tied to and I'm attached to. I mean, I'm sure this was tough for them too.
in a big case, I mean, it was the biggest case of their career. And Keegan's a great lawyer, and Matt is an unbelievable lawyer. Matt's out now, but he was awesome. I mean,
Hmm. Yeah,
but
that's a shame.
it's interesting because you talk about how I walk in there with 3 lawyers and I leave with one, right? Like that was the main point in uh I never sent this to you. I got to send this to you. I got to send you the written ruling from Commander Larson dismissing my case, because he had talked about, near the end of his ruling, he talks about all these things that the defense is saying, or it's not the defense, the prosecution is saying how they relieved the or got rid of the appearance of UCI, like that it wouldn't affect the proceedings anymore. And he said in his ruling, he said all Eric's defense team needs to do is point at their table and say, where there once was 3, now there's 1.
Yeah.
Like that's what he's like. That's all they need to do, right? And he's like, because that's it. That's what it came down to, was that, right? Um. So we had he had granted the continuance, and we
Okay,
started
so
going through the
that's what happened at this point.
yeah,
So they
yeah.
go down to 1 lawyer. Now
Go down
now
to
you're.
1.
Yep.
Colby's trying to reach out to the Army, Air Force, Navy to get a lawyer, to get me a couple more. We had another motion hearing sometime in January, um, where the government got to argue again that they had proved beyond a reasonable doubt that UCI wouldn't affect the trial. That's when I think a couple days before that motion hearing, we got the results of the investigation into Colonel Shaw, and that was a whitewash of an investigation. They basically said he didn't do anything wrong, right? Um,
And the
and
thing is that you had statements.
yeah,
Did you have recordings or just statements?
just written statements.
Okay,
But it's
that's
7
strong.
sworn statements
Yeah,
from
7 from who are all saying the
Marine
same thing.
officers, right? Like
Right.
that does carry weight, right?
It does.
So, and obviously all didn't tell the same thing, because or the exact same story, because everybody interprets stories their own way, right? But the gist was, this is what Colonel Shaw said, and everybody's like thinking, man, he just threatened Matt. That's basically what everybody left thinking. So,
I can't believe he wasn't reprimanded for this. Like at
no,
least like they
he
at
was
least.
kicked out of, like, they did remove him from his job.
Mhm.
But, he retired as an '06.
Right.
That's
Full benefits. They
yeah.
didn't, and then no strike against his law license, none of that.
No, nothing. Nothing. He
So
wasn't just
no, yeah, that Mandy fight did Shaw get fired? Yeah, so he did get fired from his position, but retired with full benefits as an '06 and still as a practicing attorney, and no bar complaint, or if there was a bar complaint, nothing came of it.
I think people did try to go after him in the bar, but it didn't come to anything.
It didn't come to anything. Okay, so now at this point, the government is still, I mean, because this is so off the subject of even your case. Like your case should have been about whether or not a murder took place. That
Yeah.
all there is to it. And you weren't even the one who punched this individual. You were the one who took care of this individual. That's the part that also blows my mind, is that how in the world did they even associate you with this when you weren't even the person who hit him back? It just blows my mind.
Well, I mean, I think what the government did is they came to the determination that I did something wrong medically, and he died because of a lack of medical care on my part. Well, I'll fast forward and kind of talk about Danny and Josh's trial. Basically, at the end of that trial, it was determined him hitting his head didn't kill him. He aspirated on his own vomit because he was drunk, right?
Right.
Even the government's own uh witnesses, I think, was it like their neurosurgeon or neurologist? Even he had said, yeah, there wasn't enough bleeding in his brain for him to die from that. Even they were saying, yeah, it was the not breathing for 6 minutes that killed him. So the head trauma, because it's head trauma, right? Anytime you
Yeah.
hit your head and you're bleeding,
Yep.
it's they're like that. Basically, that's not what killed him. So, but yeah, we could all tell that they were probably trying to focus their efforts on me because of the medical stuff. But then, once you get into Danny and Josh's trial, it's like they diverted back to, well, it was the fight that caused them, So, but anyways, I just kind of jumped onto a tangent there.
No,
But
it's
yeah, so
okay. It's just, I think that honestly, it looks to me like the prosecution and the government wanted to just go to what was the most easiest explanation. And the easiest explanation was to pin it on the people that he got into a fight with instead
yeah,
of looking at the evidence.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, after that second motion hearing in January, it was around, I think, the beginning of February. Commander Larson gave his decision, and it was to dismiss the charges with prejudice. And for anybody that doesn't know what that means, it means you can't be charged with it again. So
Mhm.
there's dismissing charges with and without prejudice. So, but shortly after that, the government. So like here's the next part of it. Right now, I start going through the appeal process. So the government appeals that decision by my judge, and so now I have, Colby's still my lawyer, but I had two appellate lawyers taking care of my case. And the first the first appellate court it went to is the Navy Marine Corps Court of Criminal Appeals. That happened in, when was that? I think it was August. No, that it was sometime that summer. I think it was June. It was June that they did their oral arguments to the justices at NMCCA, and then August they gave their decision, and their decision was, yeah, Commander Larson shouldn't have dismissed these charges. Eric's charged again with these. Eric, the charges are reinstated. So then, my lawyers got to request an appeal to the Court of Appeals of the Armed Forces, which is the military Supreme Court. And they took the case, and it was in April of 2023 that they heard oral arguments for that. And I actually went to Washington, D.C. to see that because all those are open to the public, right?
Mhm.
I went there and watched that, and that was very, very
So
interesting
what
to
was that
see.
like? What I mean,
Uh, it was awesome, actually, because my lawyer got to talk first, Kristen, and she did an unbelievable job. Right? So they're standing there. They have, I think it was like 20 minutes to talk. So they have their spiel, what they want to say, and the justices can ask them questions. I think there's 5 of them that were up there. They can ask them any question they want to during their presentation, right? And she had some questions that were, I guess, tough, but she answered them great, and like she got to keep flowing, right? You could tell like she kept going through and saying like all her main points, right? She got to all of them. And then the government steps up, and this dude doesn't make it 30 seconds without Chief Judge Olson interrupting him and asking him the most important question and the only question that needed to be answered. He asked him what was Colonel Shaw's purpose and intent saying what he said to Captain Thomas. And nobody can answer the question.
wow.
And basically, I knew what Justice what the judge was getting at. He was getting at, we don't know what he meant by that, so we have to take it at face value,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, you
And
do.
at face value, it's a threat to Matt.
It is.
So
He
that's
threatened your
basically what it
lawyer
came down to. Yeah.
and basically got away with it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the bottom line. And it, and the thing that really upsets me too is, I mean, I still think back to like Rick's family, and they were also harmed by this because
Okay.
this now drug out for 4 years.
Mhm.
They had command, they had the lawyers getting threatened. I mean, this family obviously doesn't feel like they got justice in this issue either, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I mean, the other thing too, though, is the prosecution lied to them for years.
Right. And biased them
Oh
to
yeah. Oh yeah.
to not look at the evidence and not see what happened, but
Hmm.
to believe the prosecution's version of this for years. It's like parental alienation
Yeah,
when
exactly.
you're only subjected to one side of the story over and over and over again, and you don't have the opportunity to look at the evidence holistically from both sides.
Uh-huh.
This is sadly what will end up happening. So
Well, and the deal too, because you've been covering all this stuff, is the prosecution will take, you know, and all investigators do this, right? Like they take little pieces
mhm,
from the evidence and then weave that all together to make the story that they want to tell.
correct,
But the truth is, like, those pieces of the evidence line up for what they want to tell, but that doesn't tell the whole story, right?
correct.
So
Absolutely. And that's why a open court is so important. And that's why we can't, there has to be discovery. That's why both sides have to call witnesses. That's why we absolutely need a process that's fair, no matter what the case is. And what I'm learning in a lot of these cases, like the one I'm covering here tonight, is that unfortunately there's these factors that come in that, like this undue command influence issue, that just completely tear the case apart. I mean, this could have been a case. Number one, it should have never been delayed the way it was for COVID. I mean, that part I'm not completely blaming the military for, but I'm
yeah,
kind of like, that's a little ridiculous. But then number two, they sabotaged what should have just been a case that looked at the evidence, and instead it went down this whole other rabbit hole that had absolutely nothing to do with the case because of somebody tainting the outcome.
yeah.
And that's really upsetting. It's unfortunate. And it needs to be talked about because I'm sure your case isn't the only one. In fact, I know it isn't because Darren Lopez was another one who this happened to, and he's on the call right now. And this is a common issue that happens within military court cases, and it's why we need to reform the military justice system. So I think this is really important. And I know we've gone way over the hour time, and at this point, I'm okay with that because this is a really important conversation that needs to be had. So you get to the Supreme Court of the Armed Forces, and you're sitting there, and what happens? What's the outcome?
Well, they didn't make it. Yeah, they didn't have the outcome that day, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until I actually so that summer of 2023, I knew it was coming to an end quickly, right? So we had plans to move to Michigan, in the home I'm at now, and so I came up here with my family, and because we wanted to get the kids in school, uh, and I had to, yeah, I'd taken leave, but I had to get back. I maxed out my leave. I think I had like 35 days at that point, and I had to go back to North Carolina on August 2nd, and the next day I got a call from my appellate lawyer saying, hey, they up they reinstated, or they've dismissed your case, or dismissed your charges. It's over. It's done. So
Wow.
I think that next day I went and saw my command master chief, Joe Martin, and I was like, hey Joe, I want to get the fuck out of the Navy right now. And he's like, what day do you want to retire? I'm like, well, they let me retire the end of this month. And he made some phone calls up to, wherever Nav PERS or whoever you have to
Mm-hmm.
talk to, and they came back and said, hey, if he puts in August 31st, we'll approve it. So
Awesome.
I yeah, I'm pretty sure I set the record in the military for quickest retirement request, and
Processing.
for the quickest processing. Yeah, so not even 1 month, and I was gone. But I had actually done a bunch of stuff beforehand. I was well prepared. I already done all the stuff for my VA claim, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was ready to go, and yeah, August 31st, I was done. I got to retire honorably, and it's funny because I do look back at this, and I think back to the command. They're definitely out to get us, and they threw hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? If not more, if you were to combine, think about all three of us, right? Me, Danny, and Josh, at this to try to burn us, right? And I got nothing. I wasn't NJP'd. I didn't lose my rank. I didn't lose any money.
Right.
So if anybody
Yeah.
from that unit's listening, yeah, I won, motherfuckers. That's right. So
Good.
the only downside is that I was in 2020. I was selected for senior chief, and they didn't give me that promotion. But I'm fighting to get that back at the Board of Naval Corrections.
Good. Good. I mean, your name has been cleared, and I believe that that's the right thing to do. And there are people within the DoD that I believe or hope that are working those processes quicker. I heard there are lots of delays when it comes to those processes, not just that, but medical boards and other things. And I do believe that those processes need to be done in a timely manner. And I will continue to talk about those issues as well, because I believe that people deserve not to have things delayed over the course of 4 years for something that could have been resolved within a year or so. I mean, that is my viewpoint on your case.
I need to remember, Teresa. You guys send me some reminders to send you some stuff that's some good reads, like my judge's ruling, the Shaw investigation. There's a lot of good stuff out there. I'll send it to you, because then we'll have some talking points when we get out to San Francisco next month.
I love it. Yeah. So Eric and I are also working on a piece together that is going to talk about some of these flaws in the military justice system. And we know there are a lot of lawyers who follow my show. I'm very thankful for my lawyer friends, and they know the law better than I do. So as an advocate, we want to see some of these changes happen. I mean, it was the reason why I've said this a million times. It was the reason I supported Pete Hegseth. This was the reason. I did this because I did this past January. I went to that Senate confirmation hearing because I wanted to create safe working environments for my shipmates. And I did not believe with the current system that people could feel safe, whether it's in the criminal justice system or whether it's in the administrative system. And this is front and center. The reason I don't think shipmates are safe right now is because the system will turn on you if it is politically expedient for them to do so. And so I thank you, Eric, so much for your courage to come forth and share this story. As I said, we did go an hour and a half, only about 25 minutes past time, so that's not too bad. Darren Lopez says, thank you for your service. Darren has written a wonderful book. It was called The Sailor Spy versus UCI. So he is intimately familiar with this process. He spent 3 years in the brig for what I do believe is a crime that he did not commit. He has shared his story on my podcast, and it's pretty eye-opening. So I will continue to share these stories. These are the hardest shows I do, but they are the most fulfilling, and I believe they're the most meaningful. So thank you so much, Eric. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about the case, or anything else that you want to add before we leave the call?
No, I mean, I think you can tell from talking, and there's definitely a lot of like tangents to this story. I mean, there's things you could, there's different facets of this story that we could each be their own episode. So there's a lot to it. I mean, and what's interesting is like a lot of people listening probably thought I told the whole story. I mean, I really just scratched the surface. Like,
you did.
Yeah.
There was the whole tangent about the medical reports that you were able to decipher in a way that, like, it just to this day amazes me that like they didn't have that kind of expertise, and how that came in handy. That's a whole tangent right there that we didn't get into. So
and there's that. I mean, there's going into like the investigation into Colonel Shaw. There's Danny and Josh's trial, because I had immunity at that, and I was a witness in that, and I was on the stand for about 3 hours taking questions. They ultimately got found guilty of for drinking, for violating General Order Number 1. They were still able to retire, but it was last December. They appealed their conviction, and it was overturned at NMCCA. They said, yeah, there was UCI. Colonel Shaw did affect their case as well, and they and MCCA ended up dismissing or setting aside their conviction. So there's a lot to it.
There is. And what I also hope, Eric, is that your conversation with me, as long as it's not shadow banned, because of social media likes to shadow ban my podcasts, but I'm hoping that we can spread this podcast far and wide, especially with the reels that'll come out, the blog that'll come out, and we inspire other service members to know that there are safe spaces to share these stories and to let people know that they are not alone. They are not the only ones fighting a difficult case, and they are not the only ones trying to get through the system and not pay an arm and a leg for a lawyer and not understand the process or understand all the tricks of the prosecution and the motions that can be drafted and all these other things that people are not aware of that happen within our legal system. And there needs to be transparency on that so that people are prepared of what they're up against if the system turns on them. So I really thank you so much, Eric. You explained this really well. And we did have a number of people that are very near and dear to me, including Darren Lopez and Mandy Feit that joined us tonight. And I have no doubt that others will continue to follow this case and follow your journey as well. So thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks, Teresa. I appreciate it.
Awesome. I will meet you backstage as I go full screen. All right, guys. Thanks for sticking with me. I know this one was long. Next week, I only have one podcast because I am going to Kansas. And I'm actually going to be a guest on my friend Chase Spears' Finding Your Spine podcast. So we're going to record in person. And then towards the end of the week, I'll be having back on former Navy SEAL Bill Brown, and he's going to be giving an update on the New York City SEAL Swim, which, of course, was a very, very special event for myself and many others. And we will also be talking about his ongoing lawsuit against his law firm and also pushing for legislation within the state of New Jersey to make veterans a protected class. So that is an interesting case that I didn't know anything about until Bill educated me on that. So we're going to be talking about that and ways in which we can tighten up our legislation and make sure that it's fair to veterans. So with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. As I always close out these calls, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and talk to you all later. Bye-bye.